there's a couple pieces I want to cover. One is Aubrey Marcus. Who is he? Why do people constellate around him? And then I have a follow-up question around that. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm not the expert. I definitely recommend Matthew North's video that he did on Joe Rogan.
Is Matthew North still alive?
No.
He's not alive.
No. And he ceased to be alive shortly after that video came out. And after that video came out, we have never seen Aubrey Marcus and Joe Rogan together.
Right.
So Aubrey, I mean, very similar to Daniel Schmachtenberger. They're these like kind of meaty guys who make their way into culture through biohacking, through nootropics, right? So through supplements that affect the brain. And then they're propped up as these thought leaders, right? But they both have that same thing in common. And he has the Joe Rogan adjacent thing. He has the people on his show who are all part of it. He's big in the whole psychedelic realm, where you have people who've been in the psychedelic realm much longer with much more chops, but they're not propped up to be the mouthpieces in the same way. Matthew North spoke about, his father's connections to Mossad. I can't speak to that. I know he was in a big accident, so you could see how his nose is messed up in all these pictures. And Emily and I did a couple shows on this. Like, he was drastically different after that accident.
The other thing that's really interesting, and I've, done a little diving into his background, there's very little information about Aubrey Marcus.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that doesn't really share a lot about, like, where he grew up, but you really don't know a whole lot about it, right? No. It's a very interesting scrub in terms of his background.
And you'll find the exact same scrub on Daniel Schmachtenberger, who's this parallel thing. So Schmachtenberger had his nootropic. You can't find any information on him. Now he's being propped up as a thought leader by the exact same people.
Right. And his company is called On It.
Yep.
Right. On It. And by the way, On It is one of the products that is, I think, either manufactured and or distributed and marketed by Unilever.
Oh.
And Unilever just came out, the CEO of Unilever came out about 6 weeks ago and basically said, we don't care if you think we're woke. We don't care if you think that our pursuit of diversity, inclusion, and equity is a deal killer for us as a corporation. We stand by this. And he said that in the same room as Larry Fink from BlackRock. So On It is part of the Unilever family.
That's very significant. That feels extremely significant. So Aubrey, he and Charles just led this festival. It's this, I think it was called Arcadia with a K. Mm-hmm. And it's some like psychedelic festival where you have to apply to be a part of it. And you don't know what psychedelics they're going to give you. But I see it as all being part of this like kind of Jamie Wheel ethical cult, like all tied into the same ops that brought psychedelics to America from the get-go through Sandoz and the Nazis. I just see it picking up the same thing, and like, what a great way to mind control people when you have access to their psychedelics and are programming them when they're in that very nimble state.
Right. So you can also see, as we move deeper into the protocols of the World Economic Forum, that almost in a parallel track, Oregon is decriminalizing psilocybin.
Mm-hmm.
There's been a kind of a groundswell movement for microdosing, right? You can start to see all these things now begin to emerge. And there's this one woman who writes from one of the British rags, and she's always left-leaning WEF. I mean, you could just set your clock by what she's going to talk about. But then she does a piece on the potential efficacy for mental health in psilocybin, right? There's no mistake that these two worlds are starting to merge, right? And
By design.
by design. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I see Aubrey Marcus is being put as a figurehead for that. And then I'm guessing, like my guess is that they tapped Einstein, who I'm guessing was free, was independent, was working for the forces of good. And I feel like when he was slammed as an anti-Semite and as a, anti-vaxxer and all of that, it was very easy to absorb him, right, by these people who had his back and were lauding his courage, implying him with God knows what psychedelics. And so my theory, I'm making this up in my head, is that now he's being embraced and folded into that, and probably doesn't know how nefarious is. Although I do think a lot of people with kids are folding and selling out because they're being told, well, this is happening anyway. So you can either be enslaved or dead, or we'll protect you in our like alternate transhumanist reality if you sell out and play our game.
Right. You'll get a seat at the table is what I like to call it.
Yeah.
And staying in that world, you could even see somebody like Joe Rogan,
100%.
who's been set up as the pit bull, right? Joe Rogan is the pit bull.
Joe Rogan is like the sun around which you can, like, it's so easy. I drew this horrible map diagram that's like, I don't have much earth in my chart. So it's not like a very coherent or cohesive map, but all roads point back to Rogan, whether he knows it or not. He is absolutely one of the main propaganda arms for this op, and specifically Consilience Project, Santa Fe Institute, and Lifeboat Foundation, which are all this like gross transhumanist genocidal trifecta.
Right. And ironically, Joe Rogan is a Leo, so he is the sun.
He is the sun.
I always found this fascinating, that he and Alex Jones are born 100, they're if you can half 365, that's where they are. Right? Alex Jones born on February 11th, Joe Rogan born on August 11th, Aquarius and Leo. Wow. And there's that, and you could even, and I talked with Emily about this astrologically. I remember when the true node was in Leo and the south node was in Aquarius, that was the ascent of Rogan and the descent of Alex. And you could see this.
So they're connected.
Yeah, but one is rising, the other's descending. Right. And so, but I also think not that he's just the sun in this kind of heliotropic model of their little universe, but he's also the pit bull, because he's an MMA guy, right? He's thick, he's chunky. He's stood down the forces of the cancel culture on a number of occasions. So Joe Rogan is the sun. He's also the Praetorian Guard of this whole thing.
Remember when Candace Owen refused to take a stance on climate change because she hadn't done her information, and he was on her? Like, he was just not okay with her neutrality.
Right.
I think that was a perfect example of Joe being pit bull.
Yeah, he is a pit bull. And when he goes after somebody like Jan Wenner, oh, people love it. Oh yeah, look at him. He's taking him on, and he's taking on his subservience to authority and politics. And we just got to get better politicians. That's one side of it, but there's another side to Rogan where he also plays the role of the pit bull in the other direction, which is what you're talking about. And
well, also the fact that he's an actor, and like all these people who defend him and defend his integrity, like, he's famous for pretending. It used to be that our talking heads were journalists,
right,
or reporters. Now they're all either actors or tech guys, and no one. This is raising an eyebrow for no one. I find that
yeah. We had a conversation about Rogan, I think last week, and if you go into his background, it's like his first gig was on talk radio, where he plays a guy who's a closet conspiracy theorist.
That was his whole character. And now all of a sudden he pretends not to know anything about these conspiracies.
Exactly.
Yeah. Plus the fact that he was training in martial arts as a young kid. And it's like Emily and I had this experience. When you're in a gym and there are no adults or parents around, that's when they fuck with you.
Right. And so again, I've done a lot of background on Joe Rogan. So I know as much as I can about his history. And yeah, he did the martial arts training. He also went to the same high school and graduated in the same class with Louis C.K. and I always forget the guy's name. The guy who played Joey on Friends. They all well, what's that?
Matt LeBlanc.
They all graduated from the same high school in the same year.
That's what are the odds?
What are the odds of something like that, right? And then you look at his own personal background, and for the most part, he was raised by his stepfather, which a lot of people don't know much about. His birth father was a policeman. He was a cop. And so he's got cop DNA in his background.
Right.
And so his birth father leaves him. His mother remarries, and she marries a guy who essentially like builds buildings, right? Like she marries way above cop level, way above cop level. And Joe Rogan talks about how when he was young, his father would put him out on the crews when these buildings were being built, right? So he would have to learn about hard work and labor and, all that sort of thing. So I have my theories about who his father might have been, which I don't want to get into right now.
Okay.
But it's clear, like even in the story of the human drama, like it's very Shakespearean in a lot of ways. Right? Like his father's a cop and he leaves and he's abandoned, right? And then who comes into the picture? Somebody who builds things, somebody who creates large structures.
Right.
And so there's a lot of interesting mythos with Rogan. And then the other part with Rogan is Fear Factor. And if you look at Fear Factor, they do a lot of MK Ultra kind of shit. Fear Factor.
Right, that's like trauma-based mind control.
Absolutely. You're being buried with, spiders and worms, and you're being put in situations where the car is doing all kinds of crazy shit and bringing you to this point of almost like, ego death or something like that. Right.
Right.
And he's loving it. He's laughing all the way to the bank. I think he did it for 6 or 7 seasons.
That's
so yeah. And
he's also like the channel through which a lot of people who are involved in this op that Emily and I have been covering really intensely for the past 3 years, he gives them their intro. He's the one who gave us Eric Weinstein, Brett Weinstein, Jordan Peterson, Daniel Schmachtenberger. Like all these people were introduced to the public through Rogan.
Through Rogan, right? And what is it? The dark web, or whatever they call themselves.
The intellectual dark web.
Intellectual dark web.
They're all in on it. Like
they're all in on it.
Yeah, it's so manufactured and so it seems very clear to me.
Right. I